temperatures in the 60s, which is pretty good for the winter. I want to just give a shout out before we go any further to all those who helped put out breakfast this morning. We are so lucky that we have two very special things going on here aside from religious school. We have Roni Robbins, who is with us today to share all about her book, Hands of Gold. She is a USC graduate. Yay, go Cox. Okay, fine. And I see some ladies in garnet over there. I know you wore that on purpose. She is past president of Hillel at USC. She wrote for the Gamecock newspaper. She's written for the Atlanta Times. She makes her home in Marietta, Georgia, with her husband Ian. And we are just so happy to have her today to share with us, as well as Ruthie Levy with her wonderful book fair. So, big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. We did make the trip from Atlanta, but it's so nice that you all are here. What a lovely reception that I've been given from this synagogue. And I was supposed to talk last night at the JCC, but Risa was like, can you still come? And we would love to still have you. And then the rabbi was there. How can you say no to that, right? The rabbi is sitting right there. I've got the rabbi right here. What am I going to say? I'm not coming now? No. So, but it's so nice to be back to Columbia, South Carolina, where I got my start. In high school, we decide what we're going to do with our lives, and then we pursue it. And my family moved us from New York to to North Carolina, and then they said, you must go to a school in the vicinity, not too far away. We want to see you every once in a while. And so I got a full journalism scholarship to USC because I'm a New Yorker, and how often do they get New Yorkers at the university? So I think that was why they gave me, a journalism scholarship. And what an ego boost. I barely know that I want to do journalism, and I made that commitment. But we don't know what we're going to do with our lives, really, when you're that young. So I did. I worked my way up at the Gamecock to become editor-in-chief in my senior year, and I also was Hillel president. Now, how I managed to do all those things, I do not know. I don't know where I got the energy, but when you're young, you do a lot of different things. I should also tell you that So I was a leader then, and I did take some creative writing classes there at USC, and was starting to think about possibly being an author, but it was so back of my mind. I wanted to be a journalist for a daily newspaper, and that is what I became right after for a while. I believe that, I love the South. You may still hear some New York in me. My family that I ended up writing about is all from New York. It's so nice to be back, and I never would have imagined that I'd be back here talking about a book that I wrote. So it's sort of full circle in your life, when these kind of things happen, and maybe bashert, they're meant to be. So that's what I would like to say about that. I want to share with you also that I am active in my own synagogue. I chose this synagogue to talk to after I found out I was going to be at the JCC. I called Risa and I said, I chose this a conservative synagogue because we are both conservative. We were at AA Synagogue in Atlanta, and then we're at Etz Chaim. And at Etz Chaim, I mentioned that I like to be involved in leadership. This is my second time on the board. I'm about to be off the board, but they asked me again, and I'm on the board, and I'm also the usher at the synagogue. So I'm very involved in my own conservative synagogue. So you guys got me. I didn't call down the street because my heart is with the conservative movement. So thank you again for having me here and being here. I want to also tell you, so you see this book, okay? So what does this book have anything to do with your lives, right? That's what we really want to know when we read a book. And I know one person at least has read the book already from this crowd, but let me tell you why Hands of Gold is still relevant to today's current events, including the war in Israel, which is on everyone's mind. I'm wearing some reminders so that we should never forget that this is happening. It's there in the back of our lives, in the back of our minds at all times, I believe. So Hands of Gold is basically a family saga about the struggles of the lead character to survive. It also weaves in the Holocaust, and we know how much the Holocaust has to do with what's going on now. I wish it didn't. I wish that history didn't repeat itself. That the hatred would just go away, and I know you all feel this too in a powerful way. But the trauma of that period of history, and it's unfolding in Israel, and I know how it makes me feel, and I know how it makes you feel. And we mourn the family losses, the relationships. We feel their pain because there's little separation between them and us. There, but for the grace of God, go we. There's some other similarities to what's going on in Israel. And that is there's DP. There's not DP camps as there was after the Holocaust, and that's that I talk about in the book. But there are DP. The displaced persons are there, and they're in hotels, and they're struggling to survive and to cope with what went on with their lives and what their next steps are going to be. And we think about them. We're feeling that grief from afar. And in some ways, back in the Holocaust, there was a helplessness from people who were here and hearing about what happened to their family. There was a helplessness, and there's a little bit of that now. But my husband reminded me on the way here that we have so much more of a robust response to that which is going on, and there's a lot more we can do, but there's still a bit of helplessness about what is happening there and what our roles should be. And some people can help, and the rest of us are hoping that everyone that's there is going to get those hostages out, and that those people who are our family will be rescued. So I just want to start with that. But there's a lot of that you will get from this book. There's a lot of that feeling of, this is my story. This is my story, but this is everyone's story. This is history repeating itself. I couldn't know back when I started writing this book that there would be so many similarities to what's going on today. And I'll tell you about a little bit of that. So to get us started, I don't want it all to be me. Nobody wants that. You're going to fall asleep maybe. But throw out some names of places where you all are from, where your family is from, that might be similar to where my family was from in Europe. They were from Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and it all was Russia, and it's very close to all of those places. Were very close, and the borders kept changing. So you all tell me, throw out some names of places where your family's from. Ukraine. Okay, great. Belarus? Germany. Also, okay. Mm-hmm. Ooh, okay. Okay, all right. So I just threw out some of these places where that's in this book, and it talks about how Russia was fighting back then, and fighting Ukraine, fighting that whole area. They ended up, that whole area became Ukraine. So I grew up on Hauppauge, Long Island, and my grandparents were from Rego Park. How many people have relatives from New York, lived in New York? A few. What's that? Okay. Queens. Okay. So you know where Rego Park is? Okay. So I also knew them growing up, my grandparents. So anyway, I have been a journalist for 35 years or so since graduating. I took journalism in high school, and I wrote most of the copy for the yearbook, and then I ended up, after college, moving to Florida, working at Florida Today, and then the Birmingham News, and then I met my husband through an ad in the Atlanta Jewish Times, and little did I know, because this is how life works, that I would end up writing for them years later, and then I became an editor more recently, associate editor there, and then I went to Medscape, WebMD, so that I just got downsized from WebMD, and I'm looking for new work while I promote my book. I've been a journalist for many years. Also, I wrote for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I was a health editor, a health reporter at the Atlanta Business Chronicle. And I stayed at home to raise my children freelance from some pretty big publications. I'll just mention a few you might have heard about: Forbes, Huffington Post, the New York Daily News. Do those sound familiar? Maybe. So I've had articles in some of those places. My grandfather, I stayed at home, I freelanced, and I wrote this book. Okay, so this took 20 years to get from. It took me about 7 or 8 years before I knew I had something, and then it took me the rest of the time to get a traditional publisher. I didn't want to self-publish. I didn't want to tell people to read my books because they liked me or they knew me. I wanted it to be something that was approved by an editor. It went through the slush pile. It made it, it made it, okay? So I waited for that. I was not in a rush, and it finally happened. My grandfather left his life story on cassette tapes for the family at the request of one of my older cousins. And cassette tapes. Is this like an antique? Couldn't you believe that we have a few of these at my house? We're very old-fashioned. My husband still listens to tapes, different tapes from different things, because he has them. So, but this is exactly like the player that my grandfather left his cassette tapes on. And my mom gave these cassette tapes to me after he passed away. They gave the cassette tapes to the family, and my mom had one of them, and she thought I might enjoy the tapes. So I listened to the tapes. I still didn't know I would write a book about it. I transcribed the tapes. I did a lot of research, genealogy research and such, and then I felt like first I wrote a column for the Jewish Times about riding around and listening to my grandfather's voice after he had passed away, and thinking that these stories need to be told. And then I made a decision years later while raising my kids that I wanted to take it further and write this book. So I actually, it was 9 years until I won the Amazon Breakthrough Novel Award contest. I was quarterfinalist. I had 50 rejections, okay? So this is a story of my own struggle too, and perseverance. 50 rejections. I would have thought that I had more because the folder was I must have had 2 folders, but then I counted them, and a lot of them were like every little note that anything, some of them were just, documenting my whole journey through these 50 rejections. And it took 9 more years till I got a publisher. And then after 2 years, I lost that publisher, and then 6 months later, I gained a second one. So last year, the book was published on my mom's and my uncle's birthday, and I've since won 4 more awards. American Fiction Award finalist, I just recently Reader's Choice Awards, Reader's Choice Book Awards finalist, And then an International Book Award for Multicultural Fiction and a gold medal winner for the Global Book Awards for Biographical Survival. And it's done pretty well. During the Black Friday period, it was 14th. Right after I was 14th, and I think on Amazon's Kindle bestseller biographical literary fiction, and Herman Wouk was number 5, and Norman Mailer was number 10, and then you got Hands of Gold, number 14. So you've got that. So the book is, people seem to enjoy it, but you can ask Marlene if she liked it. So Hands of Gold was published last year by Amsterdam Publisher, which builds itself as the largest European publisher of Holocaust memoirs. Mine is part of a new and developing Holocaust fiction sideline for the publisher. The novel is based on these aforementioned cassette tapes my grandfather left the family about his adventures, his decades-long battle with tuberculosis, his near-death experiences, Jewish family in Europe and the U.S., including the wife of 60 years, shown here, at their wedding in 1927. At the very heart of the novel is their love story. Which is detailed from their first sparks of their romance, first literal sparks of their romance, to their dying breaths. In between, they struggled together, with each of them filling non-traditional roles when necessary to support their family through the Great Depression, through my grandfather's battle with tuberculosis, which is very similar to COVID and RSV, and is still in existence, TB, and losing family in the Holocaust, growing a family of 5 children, and one of whom they lost. 60 years. How long have you been married? Yes. 47. Do we have other couples? 42? Whoa, okay. How many? Anyone else want to share? How long married? Some others? 60 years my grandparents were married. And she had to do some things that weren't the traditional roles. Wasn't a traditional role for women when her husband was sick. Let me ask you here. So we've talked about these connections for Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, or Moldavia, which are all part. We said some of the people around over here talked about that, which are all part of the Ukraine now. Okay, so let me see if I can do this. Yeah. Okay, so. The main character, Sam Fox, was from a shtetl called Znatsuwa. It's spelled Znacevo, or as I call it, Jakovo. I changed a lot of the names from the truth, and just to protect the innocent and not get in trouble with anyone, because I made up a lot of stuff. So it's not far from Munkacs in Hungary. Has anyone heard of that area? No? Okay. So I'm told I can use this pointer. Right there. Is that what that says? Mukashevo. It's hard to see, but it's right there. Okay, good. I love this pointer. So if some of you are not familiar with that area, which you said, Carpathian Mountains are just a little bit to the northeast. And that's all detailed in the book. And you can see Budapest to the far south. Let me see if I got to take off my glasses each time I do it. Budapest should be someplace in here. Wait, there. Should be right around in here, but it's hard to see from here. No, I think it's over here. Okay. Anyway, so my grandmother was from Yasi, and that's over here. Right there. Can you see that, or am I in the way? Okay, you can see there's Moldavia, right? That was Romania at the time. All right. So you know this area. We're talking about the early 1900s. This map is from 1999, so some of the smaller shtetls are gone. But what you can see, and most people ask, where's Auschwitz? So Auschwitz is going to be right up here. Okay? So, and much of my grandfather's family died there. So my book is fiction because I changed all the names, as I said, and made up the dialogue and took some liberties with the facts to make it more interesting, actually. But it was based on real people. This is the family tree of my grandfather, and Marlene shared that she also did some genealogy research for her family. My grandfather's real name was Simon Farkas. You can see him listed on the 6 of 9 here, this and the second set of children. So he's right here, okay? And this says Slovakia up here, but this is their family tree. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. So when you read the book, then you can put it all together. So Simon Farkas, so he's the second set of children. Moshe Farkas married Yetta, and they had 4 children, and then Yetta died in childbirth. Moshe remarried and had 9 more. Can you believe how big this family is? Who happens to be Yetta's sister. So does anyone ever, this is supposed to be Sunday school for, let's see if how many people remember these stories. Does anyone else remember a story in the Bible where somebody died and then he married the sister? Or there's other ones that are very similar, that somebody died and she married the brother. There's a bit of this in the Bible where they just, because they tried, I see some shaking heads. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. I'm not just talking gibberish. I did okay in Hebrew school, mind you, but people tried to be very insular, so they didn't want to marry out, so they ended up marrying in, but staying within family and staying within among the Jews. So there was a limited pool. If anyone if you think of Fiddler on the Roof, there's a limited pool, and we tried really hard not to get out of that and to keep ourselves Jewish while we were dealing with anti-Semitism. So they tended to marry their own, which unfortunately is bad for us because then you get all these cancers among the Ashkenazi Jews, is what I've been told. So Moshe remarried the sister. So you have to know I worked that all into the novel, including the bit about how many the Bible and how this relates with the Bible. So take note of a few more thoughts from this family tree. You can see the first family lived in Mukasheva and then moved to Jnatsua, but what you don't see is that this next, so many of them died, and I don't know if you can see all this, but if you look here, can you guys see this? Auschwitz. Do you see all these names? Auschwitz. Most of them died in Auschwitz. And then one of them died in, and I might say it wrong, Ebensee, but I think it's pronounced differently than that. Let me see. I might have written down how to pronounce it. Avansee, and somebody in when I spoke at a synagogue in Atlanta said that they had been there, Avansee. This is another concentration further west in Austria. A total of 11 family members died in the Holocaust from this family tree. Also note how 3 of the siblings in the second set died in the United States. So some of them made it out, some of them made it to the United States here. So you can see my grandfather was in New York, and then one of his brothers made it to New York, and Another one made it to Pennsylvania, and they died there. And there were some that actually got to family members that went to Israel. So I think that's all from that. All right. So in that, he went to the United States. They had to hear about this tragedy from afar, to live with the guilt. They heard about this, and they wished that they could have done more. My grandfather left before the Holocaust, so that's how he made it out. And a few of his siblings also left before the Holocaust. And then they have to think, when they hear little bits of what was going on. They didn't hear a whole lot, but they heard some of what was going on, and they were just in shock. And that's in the book. They were just in shock, and they also felt guilty, because why didn't they do enough? Could they have done more? You have to think maybe people that have family in Israel are thinking these kind of thoughts now, like, what would have happened if I would have been there? Could I have gotten them out? Should I have convinced them not to go to the festival, or, to live someplace else where it might be safer? How can they live among a bunch of Arabs that are so against us? So it's a different perspective than what you see in Holocaust, stories, because it's this perspective of people that have left, and what they're hearing about their family having gotten out of there, and then knowing that their whole family has died, and there's nothing that they could do about it. And in the story, I talk about, they never thought, and you've heard these stories, they never thought it would get that bad. They never thought this crazy lunatic would do this, just like we never thought some crazy people would do it again, and what they've done to our people in Israel. It's just unheard of in humanity. It's just unbelievable, So, but that was what was going on. So, okay. On the left are my great-grandparents, and on the right their marriage certificate. Note the Muka Sheva Hungry on the far right corner. So it says it right there. Can you guys see this can you see this over me when I'm telling you? Okay. So Moshe and Fanny, the family tree in this document is some of the materials cousins shared with me when they learned when I was writing a book, and they found in searches, and I found in searches in the National Archives in my area in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Church of Latter-day Saints, which I shared with Marlene, that you all can do this kind of research about your own family. And so when I talk about this, I like to tell people, I did this, but you can do this. You can find out about your family, and you can go to your local National Archives and your local Church of Latter-day Saints. Marlene was told she had to go to Utah. Well, why not try the local one first? They might have the same information here. So I told her, it's okay. She'll find out about it if she wants for her own family now. But since I started my research in 2000, that was way before. It's so much easier now. Ancestry.com. Sorry to pick on you, by the way. It's so much easier now because everything's online. And but that wasn't available, so I traveled around to find the documents, just like I traveled to talk to you people. So you get new experiences, but believe you're going to be shocked by this. I used microfilm and microfiche. You remember that stuff, like card catalogs? Does that even exist? And census data. So, like I said, I think I. Okay, great. Good. This is my relatives heard I was interested in family genealogy and help. The cousin went to visit this area where my grandfather lived. You'd think that these cards were from the 1950s, but if you can see the date stamp, it says 1598, which actually is my son's birthday, but when my son was born. But just a lot of irony. in when you start writing, you realize there's so much irony that's just placed there almost. Thank you, God. So I couldn't have made that up, but actually, my son was named for my grandfather. His name is Seth, and maybe you'll hear about him someday. Seth Zane Robbins, is he's an actor in LA, but he was named after my grandfather. So you can see there's cows walking in the street next to the cars. At that time, my cousin reports that there was still no electricity in many places, and the house where my grandfather lived apparently was still standing. It was wood, though stone was added, and then bricks. And I have a photo that my cousin emailed me, but it's hard to see much in the photo except the roof. I don't know. It's hard to see. This is hard to see too, but cows. There are cows in the street. This is my grandmother's family tree. I draw attention to some of the boxes along the left-hand side of the page, so you won't be able to see them, but I'm going to read them to you. Some interesting details I pulled from this tree for the novel. So, from Montreal, the family moved to New York with only 50 cents in their pocket. Everyone's got this story. They took only what they could put on their bodies and they went, right? So Moshe Meir made a brief visit to his son Shloime in Montreal, but finding no Jewish, I think he meant Yiddishkeit there, in America, he returned home never to see his descendants again. Family left in Europe are known or presumed to have perished in the Holocaust. One relative survived and wrote to Shloime from Israel in the early 1960s. So we do have some Israel connections. Okay, so on the next column of lineage, in the middle are my grandparents, Simon and Sarah Leah, and at the very bottom, I may not be able to see this. Let's see if I can find them. Twice on here is mentioned Simon and Sarah. I haven't had a pointer before, so I just usually don't try to find it. But I'm on the second set of column of lineage. In the middle are my grandparents, Simon and Sarah Leah. And at the very bottom, there's a Lewis Smith. In the very small print, pulled out and magnified on the right, it reads, "Married and annulled Sarah Leah." That's my grandmother. All factoring into my novel's names changed. My grandmother was married before she met my grandfather, and she married a cousin. They had their first child soon after my grandparents married, and I won't ruin it for you, but you're starting to get a little bit of a picture, and you read the novel and you'll learn about their very complicated relationship. I wish I could see better some of this. You'll believe me. I see it here. Here it is. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so pointer. So, Sarah and Simon. I knew I did this better than that. Okay, Sarah and Simon here. And then down at the bottom it talks about Lewis Smith. And then this little teeny writing, it talks about how he had a marriage annulled. So you see, there's a lot of sticking within the family. Causes a lot of trouble. But that's what they did. Okay. Now all right, this I have also for you to see if you want to afterwards. This is the 1930 census from Utica Avenue, Brooklyn, New York. My grandfather is listed as from Hungary. His occupation, a motorman for a streetcar. He operated a trolley. There's a dramatic scene in the novel involving him as a trolley operator. It says he became a citizen in 1921 and my grandmother in 1923. She's listed as from Romania, a maker of ladies' dresses. They were both 25, having gotten married at 21, and their native language is listed as Yiddish. They have 2 sons born in New York, listed here, a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old. So all of that is in there for me to have gathered and put in my novel. Thank you for that. But that's that's actually a census from 1930. This was my grandmother's withdrawal certificate from the New York Ladies Garment Workers Union in 1943. It says she was a dressmaker, and the reason for her withdrawal was maternity. So fun fact, she was requesting maternity leave to have my mom the following year. So I have record of that. All exciting things when you find these things. Okay. My grandfather had many jobs when he came to America. Like my grandmother, he was also a tailor. One of the key episodes in my novel involved him acting as a supervisor for a TB rehab center. He is shown here in that role. The next slide will tell you more about one of the most dramatic chapters in his life story captured in Hands of Gold. Okay. The novel includes a chapter about my grandfather being involved in a workplace shooting at a rehab center. It could just as easily been any other gunman shooting that we've heard about. We know about Pittsburgh, and we know Tree of Life, and the synagogue down the street is Tree of Life too. Is that true? And Etz Chaim, where I go, means Tree of Life. So single gunman shooting. There was one also in Louisville, Kentucky, and right down the street from me in Midtown Atlanta, a while back before all of our attentions changed from any kind of gunmen's shooting sprees that went on in America to what's going on in Israel, of course. This article appeared in the New York Daily News in 1958. Ironically, I freelanced for them 50 years later, would you believe? Take a look at the bottom of the first page under Talk to Manager. So you're not going to be able to read this, but I am going to read it to you. Okay, so Lee, who had last worked 3 days ago, entered the big open workshop shortly after 2 p.m. and talked to Max Grant, the manager. He seemed disturbed, Grant said afterwards. He told me, nobody likes me. I assured him that they did. Just then, a bookkeeper handed Lee a $40 paycheck for part-time work. He tore it to pieces. You shouldn't do that, Grant told him. The manager turned to ask the bookkeeper whether a new check could be made out. Lee talked to Simon Farkas. Remember that name? That's my grandfather. He was a supervisor. Nobody liked me, Lee repeated. I think I'll go back to China. When? Farkas asked. Tonight, Lee said. He had a lot of chutzpah, my grandfather. He walked towards his old table, presumably to get his belongings, then suddenly he pulled the gun and began firing. I won't read any more. You can learn what I did with a pretty dramatic scene on its own in the novel. Suffice to say, I played with the facts and made it even more exciting. So, but that was actually a scene, and I can't make this stuff up. That happened. I just pulled from it. So these are my grandparents and their 3 eldest children. I'm almost done. These are my grandparents and their 3 eldest children. The tall blonde is called by his nickname Little Whitey in the novel, or Mo. The younger son is Herschel, who later dies, and Deborah is the young girl who just turned 90. Actually, she's probably 91 now. That my aunt, who still lives in New York. Would you believe this? She works out at the gym, lifts weights. My gosh. Well, thank God I've got that genealogy. I got a lot to live up to here. I don't even lift weights like that. I mean, 91 years old. Can you believe that? Mo, not his real name, was very helpful in my book research, but he died right before it was published. I dedicate the book to him and to my grandparents. In 1986, I wrote this fake article for my grandparents' 60th anniversary. This was in, and you all might know this name, because I worked for some really dinky papers, just to get started while I was going to college. And this is the Abbeville Press and Banner, just Abbeville, South Carolina. I love saying it with the accent, so sorry. This New Yorker just has to say it. I love saying Abbeville, South Carolina, because, you got to figure that I'm coming here with this New York accent, and I am like a fish out of water. But they let me make this up for my grandparents. My maiden name was Kane, Kayne. I'm a Kohen. So they changed it to something that sounded less Jewish. But I wrote this for their 60th anniversary. This is little thing that journalists get to do is to take control of the newspaper and say, I want to make this fake article. Doesn't do very well now because people would say, oh, that's where fake news came from. But I did create this article so I can give it to them as a gift. I had no idea at that time I would write a book about their lives, though I knew they were intriguing subjects. What's interesting is also I had a fascination with their hands back then. As you can see, well, you won't be able to see it, but in the third and fourth paragraphs, of course, I used hands in the book title and on the cover, and it seems I already was experimenting with the concept of made-up dialogue, which I found the most difficult part of writing a novel, since I'm a journalist and usually write about real people and real facts. But hands. I have a fascination with hands. My grandfather died in 1991, and my grandmother died in 1991, and my grandfather exactly a year later to the date. I'm not making that up either. These things happen. People die on the yard site. And maybe, does anyone have any other stories like that where they die on a yard site? Unbelievable. I thought that this was very unique, and then people were telling me, my family, you have a case of that also, huh? Wow. That's love, man. I'll tell you what. It would be 3 more years before the cassette tapes on which my grandfather recorded his life would be passed from my mother to me, and I would write this column that would lay the groundwork for the novel. This was in the Atlanta Jewish Times when I was a reporter there in the 90s. So the column talks about how I drove around listening to my grandfather's voice and how others should leave their legacy in this way to their descendants. And like I said, that's one of the missions that I have, is along with preserving Yiddish, which is throughout the book too, and other native languages, so we never forget where we came from, which helps us understand who we are, actually, who we are today. And that's what I'd like to leave you with. Each of us has a story to tell. Let's share our stories with those we love, so they can be enriched with that knowledge in some way, if only to value the family history a bit more. You don't have to write a novel. I did it. It took me a whopping 20 years to land a traditional publisher, during which time I freelanced, and I was a journalist, and I raised my own children, just 2 of them. Just 2 of them. Did you see the big sizes of these families back then? There is no way I could do that. I can barely handle 2. I mentioned my awards, and I got to speak last year at the Atlanta Jewish Book Festival of the MJCCA, sponsored by the Atlanta Jewish Times, and I got a full page in the Atlanta Journal, in the Atlanta Jewish Times, opposite this guy. Does anyone have any idea who this guy is? Does anyone shop at a place called, I don't think you shop there, the Home Depot? The Home Depot? Yeah, so Bernie Marcus is the father of the publisher of this of this paper, and they gave me a full page ad, and they sponsored me in the book festival. But I must tell you the names of the people in the book festival. I'm so humbled to tell you this, really. Nikki Haley? Like, who is she? Nikki Haley, John Meacham, Michael Oren, Melissa Rivers, the daughter, Joan Rivers, Benjamin Netanyahu was remote, had his program remote. And then there's me with my book as a new author. So I was very, very excited to have had that opportunity and to speak to you. There's the book festival, and then there's you all. So, but I was very lucky to have gotten that opportunity and to be on that big stage. So this is where you can find out more information about me. We are selling books outside, and I would be glad to sign them for you, as I've done already. I don't just write my name, because I've been to authors that just write their name and take no time to try to say something personal. I'm a writer. I'm filling up that page. I'm not just going to just write my name on it. Especially sometimes I go up to these authors and I'm like, I'm a writer, too, and blah, blah, blah. And then they just write their name. Do you even care about whatever? I don't do that. I try to give you something. So I also want to leave time. Do we have any time? Because we have a little bit of time, I think, for some questions. But I do want to also tell you that that I would love to be able to speak to more groups to come back to Columbia, or even better, to be able to speak to your book clubs or your different groups, homeowners associations. I come. This is not my only. This is my slideshow for you today, but I have other ones. Some of them are a little racy too, I must say, because there's this little thing called sex in the book. I should say that like this, sex, or something like that. But we didn't get here by osmosis. So, but that's how I came to be. Is they had sex, and my mother, how that works. So, I would love to be able to have an opportunity to speak to more groups, sisterhood groups. I've talked to a lot of different groups. This is today for education purposes, but we have lots of other. I come in, I speak, and I'm much more interactive in some of my other conversations too. But we are selling. Ruthie Levy Oi Toys is sort of is why I'm here. Also, she has a long connection with this synagogue. She's head of Oi Toys and Thou Shall Read, so I'll give her a little plug. She sold my books at the book festival, and then she has the books available. You can also order them online, but we'd love to be able to have you buy today, and I'll sign them. And I have lots of different things. You can see historical records up here, and different articles that I've appeared in. Once you've read the book, I hope that you will, write me a review on Amazon or Goodreads or social media, or and also pass the book along. Buy books, and it's Hanukkah. Buy books for your family. Everyone finds something that they can relate to in the book. Marlene, can I put you on the spot and see what you got out of the book? Uh-huh. That was my mom. My mom was the first one. 16. Yeah. So just there is a bit of sex, but not a whole lot. And no. But I figure if the Bible can begot, that I can use a little bit of imagination to see. And it's a little maybe it is a little, I would say that there's at least one family member as to why I changed all the names and have an LLC to protect myself, is that I don't want anyone coming after me, but I will tell you, and it's also why I lost my first publisher, by the way, with fear that somebody might sue me, and I wasn't protected. Surprise, surprise, somebody had sex along the way, and I figured like I should say that, or else I figured I should have a little bit of it. So it was a little bit of an awkward situation to write about your grandparents having sex. Were there others? Yeah. I don't think I described sex that much among them, but but I did have to squeamishly talk about sex that my grandparents had, because then how did this happen? Just to keep it real, folks. Like that happens, but I tried to be tasteful. I wasn't anything. It wasn't a sex novel. It was a romance novel. But in romance, there has to be a little bit of that to keep it interesting. So yes. If she's squeamish, think about me writing about my grandparents having sex. But just to give you a little taste of those initial things. And like I said, I also had sparks, so the sparks of romance, the literal, sparks that sometimes happen because of energy and you rub something and then you kiss somebody. I mean, that happens. So. There was a lot of romance. They were married for 60 years. I should also tell you that my grandfather was was told at 26 that he would die from TB, and he lived till 86. And they were married for 60 years, and so he also survived 60 years. So there's some significance there. My parents are going on 60 years. I hope that they get there. Let me open this up. I think I'm ready just to tell you, to have you ask questions. Somebody has a question. Yes. 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 You all tell me this. What do hands mean to you, and what do go? I'm gonna send it right back out there to you. What do you think this cover says to you? Yes? So take that out, because those are my awards. That's okay. Those are my awards. So it's just, show her the book without the awards on them. Hands of Gold, marriage. Success. It's what? Yes. The golden age. What else? Come on. Yes. Yes. Correct. Well, yes. Yes, we said that. Guess what? It's all that. It's all that. Hands of Gold is also, if you take out this, what do you got? Now, what is the hands of God? Does anyone know what the hands of God is? The Hamsa, right? So I have Hamsas all over my house, and I can't make this stuff up, and I didn't even realize this until afterwards, how my mind works sometimes, but I lost a Hamsa when I was in my teenage years. My grandmother had given it to me. In the story, I'm not going to ruin it for them, by the way. Marlene can, but I'm not going to tell you what the real Hands of Gold is, unless anyone guesses some of that. But I lost my Hamsa, my Hand of Gold, and some of you might have that. It's good luck, right? That's a good luck. And I lost it, and you're not supposed to really pray to God for stupid stuff like giving me back, something that I lost, but some of us do ask for stupid stuff. So in the world, and when there's larger things going on. So I asked God to give me back my Hamsa, and they found it. I got it lost at a USY boat, on a boat, and they found it. So, that I'm not going to ruin it for them, but that you'll have to read the book to find out what the other meaning of Hands of Gold is. But underneath the Hands of Gold, it says one man's quest to find the silver lining in misfortune, because he was, we can all find the silver lining. I know silver lining is a bit cliche, and this was before everyone started using silver lining of the pandemic to no end, So, but we can all find a silver lining in some of the, bad luck that we have. So Hands of Gold is all of that, and the hands of God that stays with us, hopefully, and looks out for us. But hands mean all of those things that you spoke about, and gold means all of those things that you spoke about. So the original title was Meet Me in Heaven, and then I realized that there was another book out that's called Meet Me in Heaven, and then I came up with Hands of Gold, and this guy named Ed Sheeran has a song named Hands of Gold. He copied off of me because I had it first. And I've written to him about this, and he doesn't ever write back. So, how dare him steal my song? I had this copyrighted. But anyway, yeah, I'm not going to go arguing with him, but he has a beautiful song in the what is the movie? Hand of Thrones. What is it called? Game of Thrones. And there's a song, Hands of Gold, and it's a love story, but also like incest or something. I don't know. I never watched the show, but I'm like, and that's what you do with my story has nothing to do with incest. Maybe a little bit of cousins getting married and stuff, but not incest. So anyway, what other questions? I always get a question about the book title, but I'm trying to be mysterious about with the dirty hands, because it also shows the struggle of life and the struggle that he would have had as a farmer and a tailor. By the time he was a tailor, he better have cleaned up those nails, right? Let's hope so. But he was a farmer also. He did a lot of different. He had a lot of different jobs, and that's what it takes in life sometimes, is to have that kind of grit, and to have the dirty fingernails, to work that hard that your fingernails are dirty. That's not my life, but that was their lives back then. What other questions do we have? Sure. I'm a little miffed at AI, and we started to do a little bit of AI when I was there at the more recently at when I was at Medscape WebMD, which is a big company. Has anyone ever heard of it? Usually they've heard of the WebMD part, but I covered a few beats, including nurses, medical students, residents, and PAs. For them, and we were starting to use AI only for pictures. Now, the funny thing is, when you do that, you get pictures with weird-looking people with 5 hands, and it's crazy that you'll tell them we want this, and then you've got some alien being looking back at you. But what I've been I'm also applying for jobs, and AI is just taking over. So you better have keywords, and it's really a different thing. Nobody looks at your resume or nobody looks at anything anymore. They want it screened by the AI first. I'll tell you what, my son is using AI because he comes to me for help with writing anything, and now he's like, I'm just going to ask AI to do it. And then I saw, he was crafting a letter, and they did a good job for somebody crafting a letter. On the other hand, I believe this coach that I'm I told my husband, I said, listen to this. There's no way I can submit this as this fluffy thing about how I'm acclaimed, and instead of, journalists want specifics. and the AI will make me into I'm the art of storytelling, and it's just too fluffy for me. It's not specific enough. So yes, we're being replaced by AI. I hate to tell everyone. I still don't think it's very personal. I think that we're still finding that it's not specific enough. It's too general. It's taking things from a lot of different areas, and you can't. AI could not have written my book. Let's just say that. They can't get personal enough. They can't feel what a person can feel. The emotions that come out of, as a writer. So I think you still need to look at it. In some cases, for my son writing letters to people, when it's very, very general, I think you can still get away with it. But I trained as a journalist, and I'm sticking with that I put in the sweat and the tears and the hard work and the crazy hours to not be replaced by AI. So I think for me, I can't let it write my resume. I can't let it write the descriptions because they're too, I will deliver exceptional service with, and I come with commendations. Who said so? What are you talking about? So I'm going to tell you, if you're looking for a job, or, if you want to write a letter to somebody and you don't care, but read it, because if it doesn't sound like you, really, do you want to use something that doesn't sound like you, that sounds like just a compilation of facts? Any other questions? Somebody? Anyone other? Questions about the book? Questions about writing? Questions about what the trip is like from Atlanta? I have not yet. It came out last year, and I've talked to senior centers. I've talked to senior centers, synagogues, sisterhood groups. I spoke at educators at an educator conference. Jewish, most of it is Jewish community, but also homeowners association. I'll speak anywhere. If you have an audience for me, if you know of something, you can get in touch with me. I have cards. Yes. And I reached out to them this week when I did some little research, and thank you. And if anyone has any connections, but I have to follow up with them. But yeah, and I also told them I also reached out to Hillel and made contact there, and I also made contact to my school, to the journalism